for your institute and working on the Middle East issues and international security. The GFSIS Estonia continues to organize the webinars on the hottest and the most important international affairs issues. I'm Alex Petriashvili and happy to host this webinar today. Of course, the major focus is on the talks over the Middle East, on the peace talks between the United States of America and Iran. The first talks have taken place in Bürgenstock in Switzerland. The encouraging progress. That's what we're hearing from the mediators, Pakistani and the Qatari mediators, as well as some positive signals from both. The U.S. Vice President has held the press conference in Switzerland and talking about the positive progress and laying the ground for the building of the house for the long-term durable peace between United States and Iran. And the Iranian side also, the foreign minister Arakchi is saying that some good progress has been made and something's been achieved on the waiver of the oil and petrochemicals export. Some assets have been frozen, etc., etc. So, Alex, tell me first, what has been signed in the memorandum between the United States and Iran? This is my first question. What has been achieved today and yesterday in Switzerland? This is my second question, and then I will follow up on your responses.
Thank you, Alex. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and I really look forward to our conversation. Look, as you pointed out, the Memorandum of Understanding signed last week really covers a number of key issues, not to solve the differences between U.S. and Iran. That's really important for us to remember. For example, the nuclear issue really isn't at the heart of the discussions right now. That's something to be discussed and perhaps resolved later down the road. What they're doing right now is to preserve this very frail ceasefire and set the stage for negotiations. And what you've seen over the last 48 hours or so over the weekend in Switzerland is this decision to, start focusing on the technical aspects. So the politics, if you will, has now done its part. The politicians, Ghalibaf, Arakchi, President and Vice President Vance, they have now approved for the technical teams to sit down and start talking about those, thorny issues that needs to be discussed, again, with the aim of resolving them. What are they? We know, for example, in the short term, there's the issue of mechanisms around ensuring that the maritime traffic and the Strait of Hormuz continues unimpeded. You've got the issue of Iranian frozen assets that is important for the Iranians. They are cash starved. They need some of that money to re-inject them back into their economy. And then you have the issue of obviously how, when, where to start the heavy lifting when it comes to the nature of Iran's nuclear program, how Iran can have a nuclear program that the United States can live with, if you will. That it includes things like the future of the enriched uranium, the 60% of 440 kilograms of enriched uranium, whether Iran has the right to enrich uranium or not going forward, which seems to have been accepted by the Americans. The question is what sort of limitations will be put there in terms of capping it, in terms of when Iran can do that. Is it 15 years? Is it 10 years? Those are the sort of things that they need to talk about. But the first milestone, first important step on the nuclear front is obviously the return of the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. Those folks being on the ground and reporting back that they're happy with what they see, that they have access, that they don't have any immediate concerns. That could really be helping President Donald Trump and his administration selling to the extent that it's possible politically the message that, we've got a good deal now. IEA is back in Iran and they can tell us what's happening. But the reality is IEA was there before this war. But that we've sort of put that aside for now, and um, uh, we have to deal with the reality as it is. So, I share your optimism, if that's what I heard from you. I have heard both the US side and the Iranian side describing this as relatively positive. So positive, in fact, that the Iranian President Pezeshkian, I just saw before I came on, is reportedly going to Pakistan on a day trip to thank the Pakistanis for their efforts. I'm sure he wouldn't have done that if he didn't have a good feeling about where this process is going. So far in this early stages of the 60-day period, which would, take us to last week of August, a lot has to be done. I'm almost pretty sure that the 60-day will have to be extended. But the fact that the teams are now going to be put together to discuss the technical aspects of the various files, that hopefully means we're not going to see much more of this sort of war of words in social media that we've seen over the last many months. This sort of, victorious claims of victory on both sides repeatedly. Hopefully, we will see less of that and more on actual negotiations on substance that matters, that would make sure deals that are sustainable can be reached.
Yeah, as Vice President J.D. Vance has mentioned in his press conference, President Trump has to respond to the so-called trash talk. He said, as the millennials are calling the talks which are not true. So he has to respond to the trash talks and to give the true essence of the developments. But I will ask about the victorious statements and who won, who lost later on. But let's go point by point. The issues. I understand that the issue of the nuclear program would not be agreed overnight, definitely, and it will definitely need more than 60 days. But now about the freezing the assets, Some assets will be free, will be unfrozen, but the Vice President J.D. Vance says that if it is unfrozen, then it will be overlooked by Qataris, and it will go for buying the American soy, American wheat, and American goods for the Iranian people. So, where is the truth? What is this? All this unfreezing of the assets. And my next question will be about this 300 billion fund, which looks really murky. Correct me if I'm wrong. With the involvement of the U.S. companies, the Persian Gulf countries, and there is no commitment yet. So where is this financial issue really now located?
Yeah. Alex, let me very quickly just react to something you said. You said, and I tend to agree with you, you said 60 days is not enough for resolving the nuclear issue. And I tend to say it's probably not enough. But we shouldn't forget the fact that much of the hard work was already done back in 2013, 2015. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel here. If you want another kind of nuclear deal, you already have a good start. You can't package it that way. If you're Donald Trump, you have to package it differently, very different from JCPOA, but that's politics of it. The substance actually doesn't have to be that different. If you already accept Iran's, what Iran claims to be its right to enrich uranium and so on, if you accept that, then that's not that different from what was achieved by the Obama administration. So you can go back and put it together, presumably much faster, if politically you're inclined to go in that direction. In terms of the assets that you mentioned, unfreezing of Iranian assets, and the two numbers mostly reported in media are the 6 billion and up to 24 billion. These are liquid assets. This is literally, from what I understand, cash that's sitting in accounts that Iran can have quickly access to. The 6 billion is actually money that Iran generated from selling crude oil to South Korea. For a long time, the South Koreans would not give it to Iran because they didn't want to upset the Americans. And then under the Biden administration, that money was sent to a bank account in Qatar. And then October 7th happened, and the money was frozen again by the Americans. There's a big difference here. The Biden administration said, you can use this money to buy non-military goods and services. Whereas politically for the Trump administration, they're trying to actually make this look like a big win for the American taxpayer, and they're saying this is the Iranian money going to help create jobs in America. This is pure politics. This is pure politics. This is a way to sort of sell this to an American, very skeptical public when it comes to this war and this memorandum of understanding, frankly. But in many ways, it's not that different from something we've seen in the past. Now it goes up to $24 billion. It's obviously significantly more money. Then the question we have to ask is what kind of guardrails will there be to assure that US doesn't find some of that money, for example, going to Hezbollah or something that would become a headache for the Trump administration, the US domestic political scene. So those are the types of things that, these technical teams we were talking about earlier will have to figure out. How do you assure the money goes into buy medicines and basic things that people of Iran want? I think there'll be a lot of pushback from the Iranian side. I think they are going to push back. They're going to say, this is our money. We have a sovereign right to do what we wish with the money. But at the same time, they're so cash strapped that they can push that argument so far. But at some point, unless they really intend to use most of the money for the sort of things that US will find objectionable, then it doesn't really matter for Iran if the US signs on there, if they're buying the sort of things, basic goods and services that they wanted to buy anyway for their own people. Then you mentioned the 300 billion fund. Look, this is the big one that it's a really could be an opportunity to play a significant role in this post-war period going forward. You could see a situation where the $300 billion is essentially a bribe of sorts if it's the Gulf states that are going to pay the money. I don't know. I have no idea of knowing, but obviously the Gulf states are the only actors I can think of with that kind of cash at their disposal and a lot to lose if this war resumes again. Maybe they have the intention or the reason to want to help, maybe not 300 billion, but something very significant to sort of buy peace, if you will. That's the sort of very transactional, not necessarily very optimistic way of looking at what the $300 billion fund could do. If I'm being optimistic, and it's a big if in terms of what the Iranian regime does going forward. But Alex, you can imagine a situation where the 300 billion fund becomes a mechanism by which you bring, if you're Iran, you bring the Gulf states in as economic stakeholders in your country. Mm-hmm. They are not giving you cash for nothing. They're going to make money. They're investing in you. Just like Gulf states invest in Europe, in North America, in Africa, in Turkey. They're going to invest in Iran to make them return, but also at the same time, politically, kind of, if you will, make it harder for Iran to, down the road, do what Iran just did to them, firing thousands of missiles and drones during the war. But you more importantly want to bring the Americans in. Because, if US is open to that idea of American companies being involved, 300 billion sounds like a lot of money. And it is. But let me give you a reminder. You already know this, but maybe not bad to refresh our memory. I don't remember the exact amount, but it was just under, I think, $20 billion, something to that effect, of about 118 Boeing planes. Something like that. I might mixing my Boeings and Airbuses together. But after 2015, Iran basically was out there buying Boeings and Airbus, many more Boeings than Airbus. They need it. Their aviation sector needs all those new planes because they're frankly flying very old planes. So you could quickly spend many billions of dollars if you're Iran, if you're politically willing to do that. And I say that because there will be pushback.
Mhm.
There will be those people who are saying, what on earth are you talking about? They just killed our supreme leader. They killed 3,000 or so Iranians, and you want to go and spend the money buying American planes and create American jobs? What planet are you on? The counter argument to that is this is how you buy long term peace by becoming a stakeholder and having commercial American interest invested in US Iranian peace. That's how you avoid the war that just happened. So, yes, hard feelings, a lot of bad blood that you need to get over. But end of the day, if you're looking 5, 10, 20 years down the road, that's what you do. And you
Mhm.
recognize the fact that getting American oil and gas and Boeings of this world involved in Iran means the American president who comes after Trump or Trump himself will have a much tougher time making that black and white decision whether to go to war with Iran or not. Because suddenly American businesses and their interests are at stake. So that's how, in an optimistic way, you will see the Reconstruction Fund play a role. But it requires much more of a wrestling match on the Iranian side. On the American side, I think it's pretty. On the American side, it's a pretty easy sell. Iranian money creating American jobs and profit for that's fine unless the Iranians give reason for the likes, the so-called hawks in the US to say they're buying American planes, but it's still continuing to support Hezbollah and anti-American terror. So again, that takes me to the issue. Iran needs to make some bigger adjustments to make such a reality come about. Um, But yeah, if Iran had decided to go down this path of a new chapter in terms of relations with the United States, this is a really good, interesting mechanism to use as a way of creating convergence, if you will.
As you wrote in your the most recent article, I guess, which is dated on June 19th, the war inside Iran's right. You say in this article that you don't have to watch the reformers, but to watch the Iran on the fight on the right, the Paydari Front, and the leaders, the most radical leaders of the inside the Iranian politics. Do you really consider that they would let this deal become a durable first, and then what you just talked about, the Iranian money buys the American products and creates the American jobs. They were against. They protested the involvement of Bagheri Ghalibaf, and Arakchi. They organized the rally against them. Was it to push, make their position stronger, or it's real? It's how real is this internal fight among the right and the ultra rights inside the Iranian political establishment?
Alex, I think the fight is for sure real. And there are voices on the, as you pointed out rightly, the ultra right who think that this is the wrong path that the regime is on, that you don't negotiate with Donald Trump, that you risk more war, that you get ready for more conflict, you keep the Strait of Hormuz closed, you make the pain greater for the American side. Because ultimately the argument is Donald Trump doesn't want peace with the Islamic Republic. He's going to find a way back into another round of war. Maybe not today, maybe not next month, maybe after November, maybe next year. That's their reading. That why give up the leverage you have right now when you have the world's attention? Why give it up?
Mhm.
The counter to that you're hearing from people like Ghalibaf and others is the risks are simply too great. That the Americans, Trump has learned his lesson. He won't want to go back to war again. And this is a great opportunity to sort of go in a different direction. Um, Ghalibaf, in his latest set of speeches, has been putting so much emphasis on the need to deliver for the people, economic development. Now it's time for us to deliver for the people. This is not coincidental. That is to say that basically, if you're for talks with the Americans, you are patriotic. You care about the people. And if you're against these talks, then you are essentially a dangerous ideologue that is willing to risk the entire destruction of the country of Iran for the sake of proving Donald Trump wrong. And that's the fight. And what is perhaps important to remember is the so-called ultra-right are loud. They engage in all sorts of shenanigans, including the one we saw just a few days ago, one a member of Majlis that belongs to sort of part of that Paidari faction you're talking about. I think his name is Nabavian, read a classified document on national TV to embarrass the Iranian negotiators. The backlash was immediate, swift, hard, and tells you the hardliners who oppose the diplomatic track are there, they're loud, but they don't have the numbers on their side. Certainly not Iranian society, and I would say they don't even have the numbers on within the regime. They are, I can't put a percentage on it, but I think you can put a percentage on it in terms of members of the Majlis that are sympathetic, probably around 20% or less. And these, by the way, are not free elections. So these people are not representative. This is when I say 20% of Majlis are on the ultra-right side, that doesn't mean 20% of Iranian society is. 20% of people who are allowed to run for the Majlis came from the ultra-right last time around that elections. Without boring you, Alex, the point I'm making is the politics of the Islamic Republic is in the direction of more diplomacy. Supreme Leader, the new one, Mojtaba Khamenei, his last statement where he said along the lines of, I wasn't really sold on the idea of diplomacy, but I will accept it, is shouldn't be read as genuine conflict with the idea of diplomacy, but instead should be read as Mujtaba having learned from his old man, Ali Khamenei, who was famous for never taking responsibility for tough decisions. He would always occupy the fence. He would always say, if it goes well, fine. If it doesn't, I told you so. This is typical Khamenei household. They don't take responsibility. Mujtaba is doing exactly like his father did, Ali Khamenei, back in 2015 with the nuclear deal. So, that doesn't mean the regime as a whole isn't pretty much working around a consensus that there is really no alternative to talking with the Americans. And I suspect they will go there. Politics will make life hard. There will be things that we see on our screens, we will raise questions in our minds. Let me give you an example. Yesterday, the Iranian delegation refused to show up in a photo op with the Americans. You could read that as, oh, this is such a bad signal. This means the imminent collapse of the talks. No, it's all about the optics in Iran. The Iranian delegation shaking the hands of the American president would make life harder for themselves back in Tehran. So why do it? They don't care far less about the optics, much more about making a deal that actually will have legs and walk. So why take action? Why appear in a photo op that will give those hardliners we're talking about reason to question the whole diplomatic process, right? So that's how I see it anyway.
Thank you. I know that politics is really hard and really matters in making decisions. You mentioned the elections in the United States. There are another elections in the region in Israel on October 27. Israel is refusing to withdraw its troops from Lebanon. And just a few hours ago, Prime Minister Netanyahu has underlined that he gives the all rights, to the IDF to act appropriately in case of the thwarting the threat from the Hezbollah. So, my question is that is the Lebanon issue and the Hezbollah issue the real red line for Iran, or it has become a red line issue like the Hormuz issue has become recently?
Alex, I think the Iranians genuinely want to have the Israelis at least stop attacking Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Mhm.
Maybe if they can get away with it, force Israel to pull out of Lebanon. That's at least what they're saying. And if they can get the American president to deliver on that, fine. I don't think they are right now in a place where they have the confidence to, want to see the war between Israel and Hezbollah continue. That's not what I think the Iranians want. They don't have the confidence, they don't have the capacity, they know it. So the best thing they can hope for is preserve Hezbollah, if you will. Make sure it doesn't break down as an organization. Make sure that there isn't a new emergence of political consensus in Lebanese society that turns on Hezbollah. That's what Iran wants. Now, to the extent the Americans can help them, fine. I think for sure, Hezbollah has a unique role and place in Iran's regional agenda. It's the closest thing ideologically to the Islamic Republic. There's an emotional attachment to Hezbollah that you really don't have with any other group, including the Iraqi Shia groups, which is long. It's not just sectarian. I mean, some of the folks, our Revolutionary Guards generals, who are essentially spearheading Hezbollah's operations in Lebanon today, have married Lebanese women. I mean, this is a whole new phenomenon that post 1979. They're not just Iranians anymore. They're Revolutionary Guards, Iranian by birth, but they've spent so much time in Lebanon. There's a fusion of sorts. So
Uh-huh.
that's a reality that people often forget. So, for example, comparing Hezbollah to the Houthis, totally mistaken. Very different animals when it comes to being proxies, if you will, of Iran. Iran will want to see the war in Lebanon end. Remember, Hezbollah started firing rockets at Israel on the 8th of October 2023. Um, but that war in the south with Gaza, right now is ended. So there is no reason really for Hezbollah to engage Israel in a conflict unless they decide to do so for ideological reasons backed by Iran. But my point is, Iran doesn't want to see that because Iran right now is trying to preserve, if you will, that diplomatic channel that they're now working on with the Americans. So I don't think Iran is going to walk away from talks with the United States if they genuinely feel that the US is in disagreement with Israel in terms of what Israel is doing in Lebanon. In fact, that's a win for the Iranians because they can point to that as division between US and Israel. That's a
Mhm.
good place for Iran to be. And I'm not just saying that. Many Iranian analysts are saying that inside of Iran openly, that, the real opponent, existential one for them in many ways is Israel. It's not the United States. So if you can help these two countries sort of separate from one another when it comes to Lebanon, that's not a bad thing from Iran's perspective. If the Iranians feel that, and I don't know the answer to that, but if they feel like Trump says in public to Netanyahu, get out of Lebanon, but in reality is empowering or enabling the Israelis to be in Lebanon, that raises a more fundamental question whether the Iranians can trust the Trump administration on anything. Whether it's Lebanon, whether it's the Strait of Hormuz, whether the US genuinely is going to commit itself to not interfere in Iranian affairs as the Memorandum of Understanding signed says the US would do. So, but for now, I think the Iranians are hoping the United States will get Israel to back away from Lebanon. Um, and I think the Iranian reading is if that happens, um, that's a win for Iran because at the very minimum it reduces the need for the Iranians to have to walk away from the memorandum of understanding that they've just signed with the Americans, right? It was a big gamble for Iran to include Lebanon and Hezbollah forcefully in the memorandum of understanding. They could have had a bilateral focused on U.S. Iran, but no, they had to bring the Lebanese question into that agenda, which meant then they had to take into account Israeli actions because suddenly they have now put the future of the US-Iran dialogue in some ways, not in the hands of the Israelis, but have certainly given Israel and Hezbollah space to be able to shape the process going forward. I think the Iranians took a gamble doing that, but fundamentally, I think that gamble rests on the fact that they think Trump can force Netanyahu out of Lebanon because he just wants to see this war end across the board. And that's why they gambled. And I suspect, if I had to guess, this Iranian calculation might just work out for them.
Um, from time to time, from statement to statement, it changes, but President Trump is praising new Iranian leadership. He said there has already happened the change in the Iranian leadership. He says that these leaders are much clever, but we have to see if they change their behavior. So, does that mean that they should change their behavior in the field of the human rights, in the field of the treatment of their own citizens? And nobody is talking about the repressions, the brutal repressions which have taken place in January against the Iranian people. Where is that on the agenda? Or is there is no issue of the human rights anymore on the agenda?
No, I couldn't agree more, Alex. Unfortunately, the fate of the Iranian people now is very much maybe as it should have been, but it's in their hands. Because if the American president might have said for 1, 2, or 3 days, but back when this war began, that the United States will come to their aid, that they should rise up, they take their government in their own hands. Today, none of those talking points are being repeated. Nobody in the Trump administration is talking about human rights in Iran or regime change. We're focused on opening the Strait of Hormuz so we can bring the price of gas down in the United States. And we're talking about some kind of a deal to reassure the US that there won't be any Iranian nuclear weapon. That's about where we are. We're not even talking about Iranian missiles. We're not talking about the future of Iran's relations with Hezbollah. So, in that sense, Trump is not deliberately ignoring human rights in Iran. I don't think he ever had a plan for it. Very quickly discovered that he just didn't have the interest, the bandwidth to sort of make that into a core item on his agenda. Because events on the ground shaped his agenda, and Strait of Hormuz became the agenda. Which means, to my point, the fate of the Iranian people now is in their hands. They have to deal with this regime on their own. How they go about it remains to be seen. They have a lot of work ahead of them. The opposition in diaspora is a massive disappointment. It's angry, but it's helpless in terms of being organized, and they fight each other over the silliest of things. And the regime benefits and has done so repeatedly over the last almost 50 years. So no, I think human rights is not going to be on the agenda. I think it's going to be far more transactional. J.D. Vance talks about American soybean being sold to Iran. He's not talking about American push for women's rights, minority rights, human rights in general, and that is quite telling. I suspect, I mean, to your point about the sort of new leaders, we all know the leaders that we're looking at are the same leaders we were looking at before this war. I mean, Ghalibaf has been a prominent political figure in Iran, just to give you one example, at least since the mid 1990s, right? So 30 some years. So he's not a new political figure. But where Trump is right, potentially, is that this Iranian leadership that is now at the top, post Ali Khamenei, have new realities to deal with. And it's not so much that their ideology or their personality or their background is different, it's that they have new realities to deal with. They are dealing with a United States that in 10 months attacked them. That was not done before. From 1979 till 2025, you could shout, whatever, death to America if you're the Iranian regime, and do. But US has now taken the war to Iran. This is significant. This is very significant. This is the first time in the history of the Islamic Republic they actually had the Americans over their capital skies dropping bombs on them. Will that change their calculations? Already has. It already has. Will it change their calculations even more? Remains to be seen.
Mhm. My last question is there is a lot of talk about these days. Who won this war? Who is winning in this conflict between the United States and Iran? Let's put aside the U.S. President's statements or the rhetoric of the Iranian leaders. In your evaluation, at this point, at this moment, who is in more advantageous position? Who has more advantages, the United States or Iran? Or we may have soon the win-win situation.
Well, look, I mean, that's a good way of putting it. We have gone from a lose-lose situation to a potential win-win situation. That all comes down to whether you're politically willing to engage in a meaningful set of concessions and give and take. It was a lose-lose situation. United States spent a lot of energy, military power, questioning its own image around the world by engaging in this war, which a lot of people called Trump's war of choice. Didn't have to go to war. There was nothing imminent that was threatening U.S. national interest. The Iranians win in the sense that for them, winning was always about just surviving as a regime. They never really cared how many bridges Trump blows up in Iran or how many civilians in Iran die. That's not the metric by which they measure success. They are there. They still have the same Islamic Republic. They are now Islamic Republic 3.0. And in that sense, they are declaring victory. And maybe that makes sense. But you could alternatively turn around and say, why did you end up in this war in the first place? Why did those thousands of Iranians die? And the counter to that from the regime in Tehran would be they were fighting for their sovereignty. Let me, for a second, tell you what the Iranian state TV would say, that a country from the other side of the world would come to Iran and tell them what to do with their nuclear program, how to live, all sorts of demands. Why? What right does the United States have to dictate policy? And we were just fighting for basic human dignity and national pride. That's the argument that the regime will put out. Again, a lot of people have sympathy with that argument. A lot of people would have said you could have avoided the war if you had changed the narrative, the conversation when it came to the United States, and broaden out the idea of concessions with the Americans beyond the number of centrifuges that you're willing to give up or put away, but actually just start a different kind of a conversation with the Americans, essentially end the sort of the obsession with the United States as a core pillar of your political ideology, which is arguably what the Islamic Republic has always been about. So I think, I want to sort of look ahead. The win-win situation, if there is such a thing, at best in the short term will be a win-win where US and Iran will avoid another conflict. And for this administration, that's good enough. For this Iranian regime, that's good enough. Is it win-win, if we include the interest of the Iranian people, including human rights? I can't see that, unfortunately, happening in the short term. That's in the hands of the Iranian people, how they can find ways to put pressure on this regime to give to them what they demand in terms of their basic dignity as citizens of that country. Can the United States help? I'm sure the United States could find ways to help them. Like one thing I pointed out, disorganized Iranian opposition. Could the United States help help them, give them ideas, give them funding, whatever? Sure. That's what administrations in the past have tried to do. Certainly not this administration that shut down USAID and doesn't believe in meddling in other countries' affairs. So I think we have a window of opportunity but most optimistic one is avoiding war and trying to slowly get this Iranian regime to look less at its future of one of where it constantly has to look for ways to project power only, but also look for ways to build bridges with its neighbors, the Gulf states, and the United States. And somewhere down the road, in a hopeful situation, you would have an Iranian regime that actually starts listening to its own people. In some ways, it's already started doing that. I was looking at some imagery from Iran the other day, from Tehran, where, for example, some of these social draconian laws on women having to wear their veil in public, they're being massively loosened. I don't know if that's a temporary phenomena, or I don't, or perhaps it reflects a deeper thinking inside this Iranian regime that they just have to find ways to connect with their own people. They have lost the connection to their own people. I don't care how many hours every week the regime puts, you know, footage of Iranian pro-regime demonstrators in the square in downtown Tehran waving the flag. The fundamental truth is this is a regime that has lost connection with its own people. Now, it's the regime and the people, whether they can find a peaceful way of meeting halfway. If they don't, to your point, there'll be more protests, there'll be more bloodshed, there'll be more potential even conditions that point to the only solution to the plight of the Iranian people being one more big upheaval from within, um, as opposed to anything Trump can do, which again, unfortunately for U.S. image, President Trump, I wouldn't say he threw the Iranian people under the bus because, frankly, I don't think they were ever really top of his agenda. Um, but the fact that a lot of people thought he had an idea to free people of Iran, and then he carried on to where we are negotiating with the same regime, uh, has raised a lot of questions about American credibility.
Mhm. Thank you, Alex. Let's hope that there will be a good chance for avoiding the war. I, frankly speaking, I'm not optimistic on Iranian regime finding the way to reconnect with its own people. And
Right.
yeah, and let's hope that this process will lead to the safer region, to the safer world. But we shall see. I mean, we have seen a lot of statements before to be followed by war and military actions. So I don't have the confidence that declaring the progress today excludes the restart of the war tomorrow.
Right. No, yeah, as you pointed out, so many moving parts to this, but I just hope for the best. I think this war was a lose-lose for US, for Iran, for
Mhm,
the region. It was, how would I put it diplomatically? It was something that could have been done differently. But I've been saying, even if you want to go to war, have a plan. For that matter, have a good plan. And
mhm,
I would argue the Trump administration didn't really have a plan, certainly not a good plan. But there's a window of opportunity now, particularly for this Iranian regime that has now seen what its foreign policy can do in terms of bringing conflict to
mhm,
its soil. So they have a moment here to do some deep soul searching. Um, and I think you would share this, Alex. That I think the people of Iran would want a very different regime than they have now, by and large, by and large. But they have what they have, and the United States was not able to bring the regime down. So really, in many ways, the big kind of fight of the years ahead is in many ways going to happen inside Iran. What can the people of Iran, on their own, resting on their own sort of ingenuity and resources and all the rest of it, what can they do to help themselves have a future that's different from the last 47 years of sort of Islamist rule that has in so many ways been such a disappointment for the
mhm.
Iranian people that I suspect you agree with this as well, deserve better. But anyway, let me stop there.
Thank you, Alex. It's never enough to listening to you. I mean, but we get the such a in-depth and very valuable analysis of what's going on and what can happen in future in the talks between U.S. and Iran. And I appreciate very much your time, your thoughts, and your analysis.